Afternoon, everyone. I think there's going to be a surge now through the doors. But I knew it as soon as the lawyers have their own panel. I knew what was going to happen. But we'll crack away. It's a fantastic panel. The people who don't come are going to miss out. So just a few housekeeping rules. It's just past 12:15. We'll be doing it till 1 o'clock. We'll have some kind of intros at the beginning, and then we'll get stuck into the themes. And at the end, we'll open it up for questions, a bit of Q&A. But if we want to make it as kind of interesting and as, we want to make it going back and forth as much as we possibly can. So if you've got a question, feel free to raise your hand during the panel. For those of you that don't know, my name's Petar Orlic. I always confuse people because I start speaking British English, but I was born and raised in the UK, born in Halifax, and then lived in London for 20 years as a lawyer and partner at several international law firms. And my roots, you can tell by the name, are from the region. My mother, I'll start off with her because we're in Serbia, she's from Leskovac, and my father is from Croatia, Lika. I am going to get the fantastic panelists today to introduce themselves to start off with. So we'll go this way. So Victor, over to you.
Great. Thanks very much, Petar. So my name is Victor Constantinescu. By my accent, I have a very similar background to Petar. My name is from the region. My parents are both Romanian, but born and raised in Canada. But I've spent the last 20 years in Romania and working in Central Eastern Europe, Southeast Europe. I'm the managing partner of the Bucharest, Romania office of Kinsteller. Kinsteller is a regional law firm with offices in 10 countries in Central Eastern Europe, and I practice real estate.
Please.
Hello, my name is Primož Mikolic, and I was not born and raised in England. Boring. I'm a partner at Audi Law Firm, currently between our Slovenian and Serbian office, and we also have offices in Croatia, Bosnia, and North Macedonia. And we do all kind of transactional corporate work, of course, also including a big part of it in real estate.
Hello, everybody. So everybody needs to speak about their roots. So I was not born in Canada or England. I was born and raised in Hungary, although belonging to the German minority. So.
Oh, very good. Very good.
I'm working for Schönherr. We are also a regional law firm, having offices in 14 countries, also in Hungary, and I do mainly real estate transactions and renewables.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, we're being criticized today because, as you can see, we're a manel. We're not a panel, we're a manel. We're a panel without a lady representative. But we're not at fault. We should have had a lady that came from London, Marta Pink from Taylor Wessing, but unfortunately she couldn't make it today. So just to highlight that as well.
They're in the office working.
At meetings. At meetings, yes, at meetings. So we've got Romania, but with a very strong Central and Eastern European understanding. We've got what I call myself as a BBS, a British-born Serb. We've got a Slovenian, but with a very good understanding of the whole region, and in particular Serbia. And we've got Hungary. So it's a great kind of CEE panel. And let's focus on the different kind of, for the introduction, let's focus on the different kind of regions and countries to see what's hot, what the current climate is, and getting a snapshot from the different countries. And we'll start off with Victor.
Okay, great. Snapshot in terms of what's happening in Romania on the real estate front. I think with the Ukraine war and generally headwinds internationally, we're definitely seeing, rather than market economics driving investments, we're seeing it's geopolitics driving investments. When we're talking to our American clients or things like this, it's very much, especially from North America, but also Western Europe, with the invasion of Ukraine, they're seeing Poland and Romania are the main pillars now for Central and Eastern Europe in terms of defense. So that's now attracting a lot of investment that are going in various geopolitical directions. What I mean by that is renewable energy to wean off of Russian gas or other types of imports. You're seeing a lot of nearshoring and friendshoring, basically industrial capacity, and this is happening. A lot of that is coming now into Romania, particularly Poland, but Craig, I think, can confirm, that big Intel announcement that was made in Poland just recently. We have in Romania a huge tire factory that was relocated from Russia. There are many examples of that all over the place. And infrastructure, generally speaking, coming in to support the military infrastructure that's trying to keep up. So I think you're really seeing that a lot of these investments, people are starting to take sides. They're seeing Poland and Romania in particular as friendly jurisdictions. There are obviously others as well, Slovakia. Hungary may be a little bit more independent foreign policy, but definitely also benefiting from that. And it's just a new reality that we're living in, because in Romania we have the longest border with Ukraine. So it's something we don't see this, unfortunately, the war ending anytime soon. And this is the situation. So I think at the moment, prime property transactions, I would say, less so the traditional office buildings trading and things like this, but you're definitely seeing, let's say, quasi-real estate trading a lot, and that's renewable energy, industrial, retail parks is sort of a pandemic-proof asset and things like this. So that's...
Has there been a large influx of immigrants from the Ukraine?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's been, we, like other countries, especially Hungary, Slovakia, obviously Poland, hundreds of thousands have poured over the border, mainly in northern Romania. Less so coming down to Bucharest, but certainly we still have a few hundred thousand still in Romania. Sure.
Is it similar, Primož, Slovenia, Serbia?
Slovenia is like real estate market is doing quite fine for now, I would say. It's usually it's like that in Slovenia, and probably similar also in Serbia, that we get these cycles are a bit delayed compared to the regional and global situation. So we don't feel yet, at least, a lot of negative effects from the geopolitical situation, but of course the interest rates and inflation can be felt, especially in residential transactions. There's been a start of a slowdown in last, let's say, year of 6 months. Not yet in prices, but in the amount of transactions. In the commercial property, there's still a lot of projects in the pipeline. Last couple of years, there's been a lot of activity in the hospitality hotels projects. Now there's 2-3 big projects with office spaces in the pipeline. So we'll see how it will go, because the constructions hasn't started yet. And yeah. Let's hope the new rates and inflation don't prolong that for too much time. And then the third aspect would be refocus or focus on renewables, the solar and wind. Our government introduced 2 new laws aiming to simplify the whole administrative procedure with solar and wind investments. We'll see how this goes. One of the laws is will start to apply very soon. One is still in the procedure, but this is the aim. Of course, you always have in this renewable projects also the other side. There's a lot of opposition from the locals. Everybody would want to have that, but not in front of my door. So yeah.
And we'll go on later on.
That would be the current main topics. Yeah.
We'll talk about that in a little bit more detail about renewables and get people's kind of snapshot of that as well. But Laszlo, for a snapshot of what's happening in Hungary in the current climate.
Yeah, so in Hungary, I mean, in terms of the investment market, is very quiet, unfortunately. International investors are trying or considering to reduce the Hungarian footprint. For example, CAIMO has put Hungary as a non-core. They want to sell eight or nine office buildings, I think. And also the other, like ex-Austrian IMO Finance, SIMO, they're trying or planning some, rebranding or some reconversion of the Hungarian assets. Hungarian investors used to be very, very active in the last years. Futureal, Indotech, Wing. What we see is that they are now focusing rather outside of Hungary. So it's very quiet. There is a lot of products to sell on the market, but on that price, not so many big transactions are happening. There are some industrial transactions, mainly sale and leasebacks, but for them, these are not international investors, but basically the previous tenants are buying the buildings. Retail is also quite quiet. In the last 10 years, there was in Budapest only one big shopping mall, one big plaza was built. And just to tell a bit about the logistics sector, this is there are very special, professional, but few market players. Prologis, for example, or Logic or Panattoni, and they are not really selling. So in terms of yields, I can tell you about the office, but for the other sub-markets, we are not experiencing any major transaction.
And we'll let the agents talk about the yields and the market in a little bit more detail. But it's always good to get a legal perspective on that as well. But what about legal updates and things like that? Is there anything in particular in Hungary that's been of note recently that you've come across that might be interesting for the audience, either online or here?
Yeah, I mean, in these terms, there is 3 legal developments in Hungary now. Next year, the new Real Estate Registration Act is coming. Being a lawyer, it's very easy to talk about that. But mainly, basically the new development will be that the procedure will be totally digital, because until now it was paper-based process, but real estate register is quite reliable, and the real estate registration system is quite reliable in Hungary, but it will be digital, and then it will be possible to basically collect certain targeted data from the real estate register. So this is development number 1.
So I've got a quick question on that, because I'm always interested in that. Because in the UK, I grew up partner real estate, and when we had the equivalent of the land registry. And so, for example, all those facts that are in the cadastre land registry that you'll be introducing online, is that something, if there's a mistake there, or if there's something that's wrong, would a potential investor be able to sue against that?
Yeah, I mean, there's the usual question, regarding the security of the land registration system, but it's quite secure, I have to say. Yeah. So, title insurances we did in some of the deals, but usually it's regarded as a quite secure system. Okay. There is no issue like in Poland, for example, with the privatization. No such claims can be brought. So what we see is that the real estate registration system is quite okay, but we would like to follow like Western European trends, so therefore it will be digital, like in Austria is the case already for several years, and so that's the status.
And the other ones that you were going to mention as well.
Yeah, and the other one too, just very quickly, the Hungarian government introduced a new law last year concerning it was not a plaza stop, but it was like a need for a special permit if you want to build residential over 30 apartments or a new industrial over 1,600 square meters. And we don't have statistics now, but what we feel is that there are not many new projects in Hungary, but not because of that, but rather because of the investment climate. And the third thing is that the Hungarian legislator tries to implement the so-called construction right, which basically is aiming to favorize renewable projects. So when I establish construction right of third-party real estate, then this will be a right which can be subject to a mortgage, for example. I can sell this right because in the past years there was an issue of these renewable projects. Usual issue that you have a huge agricultural land and you just need to secure it by a lease agreement, but you don't have any like in-rem right what can be registered into the real estate register and can be offered as a security for the financing. And it was usually the issue that the financing in renewables, especially solar projects, was quite difficult.
Yeah. What about Slovenia? Anything there interesting?
Maybe just a short comment related to land register. Comparison to Slovenia, we have it digitalized, and in general it works very well. I basically haven't seen the title insurance for real estate transactions in Slovenia, so just a comparison.
Whilst we're doing that comparison, does it work? I think it works well in Romania as well, for sure. And your experience in the region, I think that's something that's been improved over the past 10 years.
I think so. I mean, title insurance is readily available in all of our jurisdictions. I think the only exception would be mainly Serbia to an extent, just because of the local insurance regulations. If they were to insure, they have to do back-to-back with the local insurance company here. But it's market standard now, I would say.
Otherwise, legal developments. Of course, we've had a lot of procedures and questions from clients in last couple of years in situations related to the increase in prices in materials, in energy, and how to work this out in the big construction projects. Also then related to some, for example, maybe specific to Slovenia, how this interplays then with FIDIC contracts and the specific Slovenian procedural laws related to termination of agreements or increases in prices and things like that. So this is one important topic in Slovenia.
When you mentioned FIDIC, I'll go back to 2008 when I was here and I was working for Paul Hastings' law firm, and I was seconded to MPC Properties here in Belgrade. And then, so 2008, we tried to introduce a FIDIC contract for the development of a shopping centre in Niš. And everybody went crazy saying they wouldn't accept it. We're never bringing those kind of contracts in. But here now we sit, and over the past 10 years, how much that is, it's standard. I think throughout the whole region it's quite standard. So it just shows how the region generally has developed. So, but just interesting when you made reference to FIDIC, it just reminded me. Yeah. So sorry, please continue.
Then another thing, maybe we had a special law regulating commercial tenant and landlord relations, similar to England in some ways, but it was an old law from the times where we had a same country with Serbia also, and this was then, because it was a bit outdated, it was terminated last year, but the legislator produced nothing new. So now all commercial transactions, tenant, landlord transactions are actually just really under-regulated. Just the ordinary code of obligations applies, so actually it's all left to the contract. Yeah. So from this perspective, it's actually more work and more important position of the lawyers also in regulating this. And then maybe the third one I already mentioned, new legislative initiatives from the government, trying to simplify and support investments in the renewables and related real estate acquisitions and development.
Victor, what about in Romania? What's been,
Yeah,
is there anything new that you
nothing. I mean, I would just mean, again, just coming back to this theme of geopolitics. I think a number of countries in our region, and Romania is no exception, is FDI, foreign direct investment screening legislation that's starting to come up. Unfortunately, well, until now, we've had this legislation for quite some time. People interpret it as not applying to EU jurisdiction companies that are investing in Romania, but now there's some change to the law the last couple of weeks that throws that into doubt. We're not sure if that's good, and then now that even, let's say, Hungarian investments in Romania or others may trigger notification requirements to the government. Again, I think the purpose of the legislation was really to start to tracking, let's say, Chinese or other types of investments in the country. We had a very high-profile case a couple of years ago. The U.S. ambassador to Romania as a Trump appointee, a real estate lawyer, by the way, who became ambassador to Romania and promptly kicked the Chinese construction company off of our nuclear plant in Romania and replaced it with Westinghouse. And that kind of thing is happening now, where the government is starting to take a far more active role in filtering who's investing and who's not. So, yeah.
And very interesting. And I know in Serbia in particular, there's been some kind of interesting developments and proposals recently in relation to the law of conversion, converting law into kind of private land. And it's been an ongoing theme that's been happening for the past 5 years. People have been talking about it. At the minute, you've got to pay a fee, and that fee can be quite a lot. But they've proposed that to eradicate that fee and get rid of it completely. So people are, it's split the board. People are 50-50 about it. Lots of people think, look, it's ridiculous, they should be paying a fee from that conversion to put it in, to make it into private land. And other people are thinking, no, this is great. It'll open up the market, and it will open up to more potential deals, more projects, etc., etc. So that's something to look out for in Serbia as well, as an interesting legal update that I noted recently. We've kind of flirted around, we've talked about kind of inflation and the interest rates and what impact this might have. I'm a very positive person by naturally, so I don't like to dwell on the kind of obstacles that are there, but these are two things I think that we've got to briefly talk about, and the impact that they're having on the market and being able to get finance. We had the finance panel earlier, and they touched on it briefly, but what are you seeing anything there, Victor? And obviously, inflation, higher interest rates, etc.
No, absolutely. I mean, I don't think any country is immune to that. We're definitely impacting the market in terms of cost of borrowing, where cost of borrowing in Romania has always been traditionally higher than other markets. I think where the segment that's going to get particularly hit is the residential sector, where I think a lot of these new residential developments there's going to be a stop to these projects. There's going to be a big question mark what's going to happen to them. And I think common to other countries in our region, with the exception of Poland, we don't have a PRS, a private rental sector market, really to pick up the slack. So it's definitely impacting the market, and we'll just see where it goes.
Have you seen, from drawing on my experience in the UK and the impact of COVID, etc., on the commercial office market? Lots of people there's so many high-rise buildings and skyscrapers that have been built in London in particular now that are kind of half empty. Is there a similar kind of thing regionally in Romania as well?
People are definitely noticing that certain office buildings, particularly multinational tenants, particularly American tenants or IT companies, are definitely renegotiating their floor space. That is happening. It's happening a lot. But generally speaking, I think the amount of office stock that we have in most of our countries can compensate for that, and you're not seeing the high vacancy rates that you would see maybe in other jurisdictions, where there's a lot of stock, for instance, in Warsaw or other cities.
Primož, your thoughts?
Inflation, I think for now, there's the impact mostly on residential part, because there's been a slowdown in the amount of transactions, and mostly from the private individuals trying to make investments, like relatively small investments, buying apartments and then renting it. It's similar in Serbia. That's by far the biggest investment class in Slovenia. And this is now slowing down because it doesn't make sense if you don't have 100% equity with these interest rates.
Thank you. I mean, for residential in Hungary, you know, we have a half, so we have Hungarian currency. For residential, given that the Hungarian National Bank introduced an interest rate, like base interest rate of 13%, so 1.3, it's practically, it's coming at 15, 17% or even more for just a natural person to get a loan, while in 2 years ago it was like 6%, 6, 7. So that's really stopped real estate transactions on residential level. And you know, for commercial real estate, you know, everything is denominated in euro. And what I can tell here is that, of course, the Euribor is like around, I think, 3 or 3.5%, but the Hungarian National Bank has a recommendation to have, I think, a 15-year amortization of the loan, which results in something like at least 6 or 7%. So, I mean, in terms of financing, you get to, like, at the end of the day, 12, 13%, which is, if you, I don't know, buying at, I don't know, 6% yield, there is no cash flow in the project, which means that, and on the other side, financing is it's quite difficult now because, you know, banks just want to finance sexy, green, ESG, we will come to that stuff. So if you have something which is not A+ and not very, very green, then it's very difficult to get financing. So I think this is one of the reasons why the investment market is now not performing so well.
So as well as that, we've touched upon briefly when we've just been discussing now renewables and energy. And we were going to have Marta, we were supposed to have Marta who was going to come over from the UK and give her kind of insight into that. But I think we've got quite a good insight into the renewables market and how that, you know, Victor touched upon it, the geopolitical investment kind of climate. And everywhere you go now, every meeting I attend, when I talk about what's hot, what's not, everyone's talking about renewables and everyone's saying, do you have projects? Do you have projects? In our kind of attempt to get away from being reliant on Russia, no doubt. So what are your thoughts on that, Lasse? I'll start with you.
So if we compare in the office leases, for example, just one note, service charges. Before the Ukrainian war, it was like average in Budapest, 4 euros, 4.5 euros. Then it went up like to 10, 12. Everybody was crazy. Now it's stabilizing again, but, you know, I mean, electricity is very important, and what we see now in Hungary, you know, on the investment market is very quiet on the traditional investment transactions, but on the solar transactions it's very booming. It's very I mean, it's very dependent on permits, but a lot of solar transactions are being made, so solar projects are sold or developed. So we see you know, very big transactional volume there.
What about kind of grid capacity and all that kind of thing? I heard a rumor that maybe you were in Hungary getting to the top of that grid capacity. Is that not true? Maybe not.
I'm not a market expert of the grid, but what I know is that, I mean, in Hungary the grid is quite old, so it needs renovation or replacement, and that is also the reason why, I mean, a few years ago, if you wanted to do a solar project, you just said, yeah, hello, I'm this and that, and I'm securing this capacity, and now you have to really pay hard money to secure the capacity, and also to basically prevent everybody to you know, secure capacities, but also to build basically because that fees or that amount will go to the renovation of the grid, which will be key in the next years.
Pretty much, you've mentioned it a couple of times about renewables.
I've mentioned a new legislature related to solar and wind. There's another point. I don't want to get into the debate whether nuclear is renewable or green or not, but EU says it is for now. So there's an important decision to be made in Slovenia. We have a nuclear power plant and a new one or additional block. The new block will need to be constructed. New government is currently very proactive in this sense. At the end, it will probably end at the referendum, so that all people will decide. But there's a lot of developments also in this aspect.
And no doubt it's the same in Romania, isn't it?
Yeah, we can't keep up. I'm sure my colleagues here, I'm not sure what, a lot of our colleagues in our real estate department have been reconfigured into energy lawyers to, to do, due diligence of agricultural lands and things like this. So it's a very, very hot market. In Romania, we started with, this was back in the early 2000s with wind energy because of the conditions near the Black Sea or Constanța area are some of the best in Europe, and so there were a number of multinational investors that were doing that. And then after the financial crisis, the green subsidies were revoked, the market died in renewables, and now it's been picked up again. And what I feel is that it's really like the market was for real estate back in 2005, 2006, where you have all these characters running around who have nothing to do with the sector, or they have basically secured 50 hectares of land and they're trying to do a solar park. But I think, Petar, what your comment is a very good one, is the race to the grid. And this is what's happening. Everyone is trying to do a project. They're trying to connect as quickly as possible. Certain regions of Romania are already oversaturated, particularly southern Romania, where, hugging the Danube, those are the best conditions for solar. And it's really a question now, who is able to get their grid connection now? And those that won't, I think there's going to be quite a few projects falling by the wayside in a year's time.
I don't know, in Serbia recently they announced government initiatives to put together kind of projects. I know that there's an auction for wind. There's going to be something similar in this for solar as well. So, like I said before, every meeting I go to, it's a topic of conversation. As is the next topic, which is ESG. I think everybody agree that every conference, there's actually conferences dedicated to ESG. So we'll talk about it a little bit today and just get your thoughts, etc. Because for one, I'm quite comfortable with the environmental aspects of it all. And I understand that, look, everyone's going to try and kind of reduce the carbon footprint by, no doubt, a particular date. But it's becoming more and more and more important. But the S and the G side, I'm still a little bit kind of curious as to specifically what's that all about. But I've seen it in the financing world. I've heard bankers say, look, if we cannot tick our box and say that you've dealt with the SDG requirements for a particular development, you're not going to get the money. So I just wanted to get everyone's kind of thoughts and opinions on ESG. Did I say SEG? ESG. Apologies.
I think you're right, Petar. The ESG, everyone sort of thought a few years ago, is this just all bullshit? This is actually going to transform into something, or this is just all for show? And I think the answer is it's not. It's here to stay. People are asking the questions. I mean, even as law firms, I'm sure my colleagues will agree, if you're working for multinational companies, they'll send you these 20-page codes of conduct and everything else in ESG, and you have to prove to them, and I'm shocked by some of the questions I get. Where is your recycling center? How many gay partners do you have? What's your diversity? Or things like this. And this is here to stay, and it's a very important part. And then particularly for these, new constructions and things like this, if you don't have those environmental tick the box, it's going to really impact both your bankability and your future sales. So, yeah, it's not it's something we really have to pay attention to.
I think you'd agree with that, pretty much, yeah?
Yeah, definitely. And maybe from a contractual point of view, we haven't seen, for now, really a lot of, let's say, strong commitments in the construction or lease agreements in Slovenia. Of course, there are already some wordings in this regard, but not really strong. But what I'm trying to say is we've had green bonds issued in Slovenia, and so that the only logical consequence is that, of course, the banks now will also demand stronger commitments in the projects they are financing with this money. On the other hand, we have an instrument called energy certificate for buildings for quite a long time already, and it's becoming more and more important in real estate transactions, almost obligatory. So this is also one aspect where E from ESG is quite important.
Yeah, I've come across that before, the EPC.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have a similar thing in the UK whereby for residential, you've got to be, they'll have a grading system, A to F. And if you're not D or above, you cannot get financing to buy a particular flat or something. So
We are still in the phase that you are obliged to at least obtain this certificate. Doesn't matter actually which grade you fall into, but you're obliged to get it if you want to rent or sell.
yeah.
But yeah, step by step.
And in Hungary, that's right. I think it's a similar story, yeah?
Hungary is quite similar. And what I would like to point out is that it's coming from banks, so financing, and it's coming from major tenants. So small tenants, they don't really care, but major corporates, for them it's very important. In lease agreements, what we see mainly are like best effort obligations, but these are not hard rules what you can, can touch. And what is very important that because of what also Victor mentioned, vacancy is increasing. It will be important to, that the real estate is basically upgraded from an ESG perspective, because if you have a higher vacancy, you will not be able to, sell it on the market, sell or let it out. So this will basically increase the gap, basically between A plus and B-ish office buildings.
Yeah, very interesting. Next door is completely packed because they're talking about hospitality. And in the region, it's one of these, everyone, it's hot. So we know that's very hot at the minute. Is there anything else in particular, Victor, with what you're seeing in the region? Logistics has been something that I've noticed over the past few months.
Logistics is still a hot market. A lot of things are still happening on that front. We're still, I think, under capacity in all of our jurisdictions here, Romania and Bulgaria and Serbia in particular, and I think there's just a lot of opportunity for that. Hospitality is something that we're less known for it. I mean, there are actually quite a few transactions happening on that front in different locations, and yeah, that's about it.
In Slovenia?
Yeah, I already mentioned hospitality. Last couple of years, there's been a lot of construction of new hotels. So we'll see now how it, in Ljubljana, I'm saying. We'll see now how they go in the market. Logistics, likewise, it's still hot.
And in Hungary?
Yeah, I mean, for the hospitality sector, real estate industry is like a big container ship, it just moves very slow. So basically, these kind of new projects, 2-3 years ago, there was COVID, so not many hospitality projects were launched. So what we see now is that there are new hotels, for example, in Budapest, but not many new developments underway. For logistics, it's it's maybe Hungary specific. There are, as I mentioned, very special specialists on the market. A few 4 or 5 logistics companies which bought all the areas, but nobody wants to sell. So basically, what we see is that we don't really see logistic transactions, and there is the e-commerce, and retail is not very hot at the moment. So I assume that logistics will be very important. I'm just not, because there is a lot on the pipeline now. in the pipeline now, and I'm not sure whether there is sufficient demand to take up these new capacities.
You talk about pipeline. Before I throw it out to the, because we're approaching 1 o'clock, before I throw it out for a Q&A, kind of predictions. And I know people don't have your crystal ball, but it would be interesting to get your thoughts of where you think the market's going over the next year or two. So you talked about the pipeline for logistics, very interesting. Anything else that you're seeing, your predictions for the next year or so?
I think financing will somehow stabilize, but it will not go that down like for a few years ago. On the capital markets, I think that there will be a couple of 1, 2, 3 years when there will be not so much, moving in Hungary. I mean, if the war could come to an end, that would probably make also the investments more active. So, I mean, I think that the energy prices will go a bit down. I think that the big, craziness is now over. But overall, I don't expect a big, change in the market for the next 1, 2 years.
What about you, Primož?
I would agree. In Slovenia, I mean, for the next 1 or 2 years, I don't expect anything spectacular, like big changes. A couple of major commercial properties are at the start of being developed. Maybe it's interesting to know that we also got a first real estate, not really a real estate fund, but a company interested or dealing with real estate on the stock exchange. So first listed company. So we'll see how that goes.
Ah, very good. Very interesting.
Yeah.
And finally, Victor.
I share what my colleagues here mentioned. I think the market there's not going to be a crash, but I think what I see is I think the magic word for us is going to be local capital. You're starting to see a lot of local players from CEE really flexing their muscles, and rather filling the gaps by some of these international funds some of them are actually retreating, as Laszlo mentioned. OCA IMO is retreating, and others. So you're seeing big names in Czech Republic. You have obviously CPI that took over all these Austrian companies, which was just an amazing move. Star Capital, BHM. You have Futureal and Indotech, very big players in Hungary. In Romania, you have the Dedeman Group. Here, MPC. I'm very curious to do what they want to do with their portfolio. In Bulgaria, AG Capital. These guys are the ones that are pushing a lot of the transactions on the market. So local capital, I think, is going to become even stronger.
Oh, very interesting. I'm going to throw it out to the audience. Any questions? Mr. Smith.
Just Victor, you mentioned AG Capital last thing. Yeah, they just opened an office in Poland, so they are going to be big players in the region. They're not just Bulgarians doing stuff; they're coming in full blast. I think with pretty strong group. But one thing on the ESG, and I actually do have a question. But one thing on the ESG is, I think for real estate, the hard part, and Laszlo, you mentioned it a little bit, was the utilization of these office buildings, and most of the owners completely ignore it. They're like, we leased it, we're done. But I think this is really going to come back and get them. And of course, the supply chain, which I don't think everyone's really looking at that closely. And with EU regulations, that'll be the first thing that will catch a lot of these guys. But my question, I get this from a lot of investors, especially not yet in the market, is for international investors, which country are they most protected in from a legal point of view? That's the question to you guys, yeah.
Very good question. I think every country is going to say...
say they're the best or they're the worst.
They're the best, obviously.
Yeah, okay, yeah. No, but some countries are probably have more protections for international investors than others. If they're all the best, maybe one or two examples.
Craig, I can I think generally speaking, none of our countries pose a risk to any investors. I think these are all mature markets now. I think they have all sufficient protections. This is not the Wild West and Wild East like it was, a number of years ago. But obviously, Poland is number one, just because of the long border with Germany, Czech Republic, and the further you move east, that's where the appetite starts to decrease. Not because of risks to investors, but let's say there's a perception issue. There's, corruption supposedly increases as you go further east, or things like this.
Well, they're just not as good as at covering it up is the problem.
Hey, but completely agree. Completely agree with that. And no doubt being a member of the European community helps as well, as is Croatia, who have brought on the euro as well. And that provides that extra stability because there's no currency kind of fluctuation. So that's very important when these investors, and I think Croatia's now, we were talking about it in the other panel, are BBB plus, i.e. investment grade. So that gives a lot of comfort too.
Sorry, may I also reflect just two notes. So first on the green, on the ESG question, you're very right. And I think what basically I see what the tenants don't realize, big corporates, they also want to tick the box, ESG, okay, fine, but they don't realize that they need to pay at the end of the day in the service charge higher service charge, and this is what they don't realize. So this is point one. And the second, about the political stability, I think that, I agree with Victor. And what I would like to say is that, what I heard or what I read, that there was already a bit of a repricing in Western Europe, and the yields are higher. And basically what I see as an issue for investors when they can buy in, I don't know, Ireland or in, I don't know where, at 8%, why should they come to Hungary and buy, for less? So this is what I see the key difference. The legal systems, they are quite stable. So that is something what I, at least myself, I don't see as a risk.
I think we've got time for one last question.
Yeah, sorry, yes. Just from
And we've got the microphone as well. Sorry, James.
you're all obviously working in the real estate and corporate sector. Can you just give us a little bit of perspective on how you see the corporate occupational demand? Is there a continuing acceptance to work from home, so there's a reduction in their space requirements or restructuring of their existing space, which can be obviously, when the lease matures, they take less space, or they're doing subletting. What do you all see as sort of the incidence of how corporate occupiers are now viewing their territories? Thank you.
We'll start off from a London perspective, which is quite interesting. I was there a month ago, and I was there for a week. On the Monday, in the City of London, it was 3/4 of what it normally is, before pandemic. And on the Friday as well. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, it was absolutely packed. So you can, I think this is a global phenomenon. This is, for everyone. I think the way people work and the workplace is changing. And I think people are still getting to grips with how it's changing and what the best way is. You can't have, for example, a young trainee solicitor not coming into the office, because where are they going to get that experience from? So it's kind of an amalgamation of all these different things that people are still kind of digesting. But that's that from a kind of international UK perspective. I don't know, Victor, what?
The same. I think I mentioned also a bit earlier, we are definitely seeing that. Corporate occupiers are definitely taking a far closer look at what their needs are. IT companies are definitely looking to downsize. There have been a couple of major companies announced that in Romania, for instance, Oracle, had a tremendous amount of space. 3-4 office buildings decided to consolidate. The questions are being asked, but like I said, I think that just that the vacancy rates in Bucharest are such that they can absorb that at the moment, and you don't really feel the ripple effects yet. But those questions are being asked.
And I think you'd agree with that, wouldn't you, if you've got any?
It's similar in Slovenia. There's always also a question of regulatory constraints or problems with this. In Slovenia, the state will need to also clarify and adopt some additional laws so it will be clearer and easier for employers and employees to know exactly how to regulate the work from home. And
And last thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, for the Hungarian office market, I think they're around 4 million square meter, maybe a bit more. Vacancy was in the last years like 5-6%. Now it's 10-12%, so it's going up, which means for, I mean, I think which means for investors that you know, higher vacancy rents will be decrease, and you know what the estimated rental value will be in a couple of years. So basically, you know, we're talking about yields all the time, but you know, if you increase the vacancy, if the vacancy increases, rents will go down, and then you know it will also decrease the yield. So I see that that's a trend in Budapest at least. Maybe the bigger corporates they suffer in getting their people back after COVID. You know, they have like back to COVID policies, but it doesn't really work. And big corporates are giving back space. Yes, they trying to give back space. We had one client. They just completely, they almost rented one smaller office building, and they just don't need it anymore. And then, you know, of course, you have a contracted rent and you have a contracted revenue on the paper, but you know what happens after that.
It's going to be interesting to see over these next year or two what's going to happen with all that as it's being kind of digested by people too. But we've run over time. Thank you very much. I think everyone will agree with it. It was a fantastic panel. And we're just to say thank you to the panelists. We'll give them a round of applause. And now it's lunchtime. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Brilliant.